So do you have to click into each country individually? That's kind of silly, isn't it? This is the Apple way. It's like in the same event that they talked about podcasts, they also announced AirTags and the new remote for the Apple TV that doesn't have like a built-in AirTag. We think you're really going to love the new Apple TV remote.
Here we go. So today on Buzzcast, we're going to talk about Apple Podcasts, the last month, the things that have gotten better, things that are kind of still the same to let you know kind of what's going on there. And then also we're going to talk about Clubhouse, and even if it has slowed down, is it still worth investing time in? But first, we just rolled out some new features on Buzzsprout, so I want to talk about those. The big one being the new Canva integration. So if you go into your podcast settings and scroll down to artwork, there's a new button that says Design with Canva, which allows you to design your podcast artwork right there inside of your Buzzsprout account. So I know that this was a really big project for us in the scope of the kind of projects we take on. Kevin, Alban, I know you guys were really instrumental in making that happen. So walk us through the whole process of putting that feature in there, and then just the reception. I know, Alban, you're our resident Twitter person. How has it been received from people that use Buzzsprout and have tried out the feature so far?
Well, I definitely didn't do any of the work on actually building it. My job is to mostly be the person to tell everyone that we built something. And then they're like, thank you, Alban. And I'm like, Kevin and Dave and Brian and the whole dev team is they're the ones who built it. But yeah, the reception's been really good. I mean, what you do now is there's a button inside Buzzsprout where we upload artwork. It says Design with Canva. And now you can just click it. And Canva has this really beautiful integration where it just pops open. You can design some artwork. I've done a few pieces myself using the integration. And then you click Send to Buzzsprout, and it's boom, right inside your Buzzsprout account. And we've just got a ton of really great feedback for it. Lots of ideas for ways it can be improved. And some of those ideas have already been in there. And so it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it really helps three groups of people. First is the group of people that were already using Canva to do artwork. And so if you had a Canva account, you'd already created podcast artwork, there is a way, it's a little bit hidden, but there is a way to go into like all folders and find your artwork and make a little update if you wanted to. The other group of people it would help would be people who don't have any artwork at all. So they're just starting a podcast and they don't have access to or know how to use Photoshop or another design application. Canva is really great in that they have hundreds of professionally designed templates for you to start with, and then you can just customize to your liking. So you find a template that looks great that you like, and you can just switch out photos, and they have a full stock photo library, and switch out the words for your words, your title of your podcast, your name, and then you hit Send to Buzzsprout. And then the third group is for people who do like know Photoshop and stuff, but there's a whole bunch of overhead that comes with that workflow of trying to load up Photoshop and keep track of your files and all that kind of stuff. So Canva is a really great graphic creation program. And again, with professionally designed templates and stuff, maybe they have something that you like better than what you created on your own. So kind of regardless of what camp that you fall into, you can use this now to update your podcast artwork. And our idea was to roll it out originally just for the podcast artwork updater and see what the response was, see if people like it and use it. And the reception has been great. So now our plan is to roll that into more areas of Buzzsprout, because there are other places we create graphics like chapter marker images and episode specific artwork. We also do visual Soundbites. There's artwork there. So slowly but surely, probably over the next couple months, you'll see the Canva button appearing in more and more places within Buzzsprout.
Kevin, are you telling us about a feature that doesn't exist yet?
No, I'm just telling you what our hopes are. No commitments.
Oh, because I've been pitching
proud of you,
this.
Kevin.
Yeah, when we started getting all the positive feedback on it, I put up a pitch inside of our internal software and said like, hey, can we put this button everywhere else and build it out so it does these things? So that was the first I heard from Kevin just now that might be happening at some point. I think what I didn't realize about Canva, Kevin, when we started this was I'm used to starting with just a, blank sheet of paper. And then you're like, okay, what's the background color? What's it going to say? And you're slowly like building it yourself. And if you're not a designer like me, then what you do is you end up making something and you just know it doesn't look good, but you have no ability to improve it. And what Canva does is because they have 250,000 templates for free. You just go ahead and you, like with this integration, we actually are automatically pulling up all of the podcast artwork templates, and they have a ton of them. And then you can just look through and say, that one looks close. The image isn't what I don't love the image in the center. So click it and switch it out for a different image. And I make the font, say like the words say my podcast name. And like, it's very easy to take a template and make it your own because it's already got all these design principles baked in. So we actually have created a ton of content now in helping this feature get out to the world. I interviewed a senior designer at Canva, Katie Piper, and she talked us through how to design artwork for your podcast. Travis did a really good video talking about just standard design principles. But what's just, like going back to it, like what's so powerful about this is Canva already has all these templates built. And unless you're a designer, this is going to get you such a better result than trying to build something from your, by scratch yourself.
Right.
And the templates are actually good. So like, that's the other thing.
Yeah.
Like so many of these, online graphic design softwares, it's fine, but you can tell like a professional did not design that. Like it's like one step beyond Microsoft Paint. But the fact that they're like legitimately good templates that you just like change a couple things and it's like, wow, who did you pay hundreds of dollars to make that? And it's all free and it's all right inside of Buzzsprout. Like, because I know for a lot of podcasters, especially when you're getting started, there's like so many things you're trying to learn and take care of and do. And the podcast artwork could be a really overwhelming piece. It's like, wow, I finally figured out what microphone to buy and I finally interviewed my first guest and now I have to be a graphic designer or figure out how to hire one. It's like, it could be a huge obstacle for people. And so I think the magic there is you don't have to stop your momentum. Just open up that little pop-up inside of Buzzsprout, pick one you like, change the text, add an image, put your name in there, hit save, and you're done. And it legitimately looks great. So I think it's a huge game changer, awesome feature. I tend to overhype things, but I don't think that it's too overhyped to say that this really is a phenomenal feature that's going to help a lot of people. Alban, what were some of the big takeaways that you remember from your interview with Katie? Because we'll link that in the show notes. It's a phenomenal masterclass on graphic design and like how to make things look aesthetically pleasing. What were the big things that really jumped out to you or stuck out to you from that conversation that you think everyone that's designing any kind of artwork in a podcast setting would really benefit from?
Well, she talks a lot about hierarchy and how to make sure, that I feel like a lot of the design tips I was taking were on the front end before you're designing. You really have to think like, what am I trying to get across here? Like, what's the tone? What's the message? And what are the words I've got to have? And so I feel like it helped me understand a lot of that design work is happening on the front end when you're really clarifying your message. Here's the name of the podcast. Here's some of the things I need to have. And then here's the tone that the artwork should have. And then basically when you have those two things, tone and what needs to be in there, then she was helping say, well, that means that I'm going to use this color palette. Here's some ways that you can find colors that work together. I'm colorblind, so I have no idea. So it's very helpful to hear from her. Like, you can go to Canva. I feel like I'm just going to be a Canva commercial for the next few months. She was like, in Canva, they have all these color palettes already built, or you could go to Dribble and there's tons of color palettes there that are, put together by people who actually understand color theory. Then hierarchy, how to make sure that the biggest and boldest things are actually getting first billing, that the thing that you really need to get across is the main title. And then one that I personally will be very happy about is we talk quite a bit about typography, that if you're going to use one of these kind of wacky title fonts, I think they're called. If you think of, this is how I put it to her, like if it's a font that gets used in like an Instagram promotional like picture or something, like it's like, you can do it, seize the date today, and it's like handwritten or something, or looks like a stamp, that's a title font.
Yeah.
It's just like, if you're going to do that, that's cool. But then your subtitles got to be like a sans serif font, really clean, really minimal. And so we talked a little bit about typography, but you watch the whole interview. A lot of the things that she was talking about are similar to the principles that we have in our blog post about podcast artwork, or in the video that you made, where you're doing kind of a quick hits into what you need to make sure you have. I found it very valuable. It was really nice to be able to discuss it with her. And we've got another video that's going to come out that is just me pulling up tons of artwork and saying, okay, what's good here? What's bad here? What could be improved? And that was really helpful and clarifying for me when we could have a piece of artwork and she says, this is working, but maybe this part isn't. Here's how to tighten it up. Here's how you can make it a little better. So that was really useful. But again, I go back to this, like, don't let the artwork be the piece that's holding you back from starting. I've caught myself in a lot of projects that if I don't have the title and I don't have the artwork, I don't really want to get started on the actual work yet. And what Canva is allowing you to do by giving you all these templates is, let's get something going. Let's get started. And if in 3 months you want to rebrand the podcast name slightly, that's totally doable. We've got I think we've got a video on rebranding if you want to rebrand a podcast, because it's super easy to do that. And in a few months, you'll have such a better feel for what your show is about that you'll be able to come up with something really awesome. So Canva allows you to get 90% of the way there with minimal effort and trouble. And then, if you want to hire a professional later on, so you could use something you could contract that out to somebody to actually get that done.
Yeah. And I do want to mention that as a special bonus for Buzzsprout customers, Canva has, I think normally they do 15 days or 30 days, a free trial on their Canva Pro accounts, which gives you access to all their premium templates as well. So as we said, they have thousands and thousands of templates, and the majority of them are free, but some of them have, photos or higher level of graphic design or something that makes them pro level. And so they've given us a special code if you sign up for Canva through your Buzzsprout account that you can get 60 days of free Canva Pro access instead of just the regular, I don't know what the regular is, 15 or 30. 30. Okay. So twice as long.
Well, there you go. It pays to be a Buzzsprout podcaster. The next feature that we want to talk about, and by the way, you can find all these on a new page that we just put on our Buzzsprout website. If you go to buzzsprout.com/new, you can see all these features that we're rolling out and little blurbs about them, so you can stay up to date on new things in your Buzzsprout dashboard. But the next thing we want to talk about is the Soundbites editor. We made a small tweak to the Soundbites editor that we think is going to make it a lot easier if you find yourself making a soundbite for each episode to promote on social media, to save you some time and to keep that brand dialed in. So Alban, what's the small tweak that we made to the Soundbites editor?
The small tweak that we, aka John Pollard, made is just that the soundbites are smarter. Whenever you go back and, soundbites are these audiograms that you share on social media. They've got a nice waveform for you to share something about your podcast. And we have always allowed you, or not always, but for quite a while, allowed you to pick colors and make them your own. And somebody wrote in and said, hey, it's kind of annoying that I have to remember my colors. And we went, oh, you're right. That is kind of frustrating to have to remember the colors that you use to make sure you have them consistent. And I don't think we thought of this as a big feature. John just went in one day and was like, hey, I saw that support email and now it's done. So it'll always remember. And we were all like, oh, that's awesome. So anybody that uses that, now the Soundbites will remember what colors you're using, and you have John to thank for it.
All right. And then the last feature we want to let you guys know about is a small update to submitting your podcast to Amazon Music. So before it was a 2-step process, Kevin? And now it's just a 1-step process?
Yeah. When Amazon launched, they did API submissions, which is just basically gives Buzzsprout away, our systems, a way to talk to their systems to push your RSS feed to them. What they didn't have is kind of that loop back. So after we pushed the podcast to them, they would say, great, we got it in our system. Then what we would need to know is what's like the direct Amazon link to that podcast, so that we can display the Amazon button on all your Buzzsprout pages and in your embed players and stuff like that. They didn't have that built. Now they do. And as part of them rolling that out, they also rolled out a whole new API, which makes submissions much faster. So it used to be you'd push to them and there'd be some delay between them actually getting ingested in your system. So they had a whole new and improved API. And again, the biggest difference to you guys is that you don't have to come back and put your Amazon URL in manually. We can now get that from them. The other advantage is that it's faster. What it meant for us is that Tom had to rewrite the entire API Amazon submission process, but he was happy to do it. And that's all live, and it's much easier to get into Amazon now.
The benefit of that is it's one-click submission. You're in Amazon. That's done. That callback, getting the direct link, we use that on public websites and embed players. Anywhere that you're sharing your podcast, you want to be able to have one place, like your Buzzsprout website or the embed players on your own site, that has links to all of your directory listings. And so now if anybody is actually listening to the podcast and they go, I really want to listen to this, but I use Amazon Music as my go-to podcast player. Well, boom, that is automatically updated for you now. So you don't have to be managing URLs or finding the exact URL for a specific episode. All that's managed for you in the back end, where it's totally taken care of, which is it's just one of those nice life improvements, I don't know, quality of life improvements for all of your podcast listeners, because you don't want them to go through 12 steps of Googling to try to find your podcast on their favorite player.
So if you want to learn more about those three features that we just talked about and all the other stuff that we've rolled out recently in Buzzsprout, just go to buzzsprout.com/new, and you can see everything we've been working on behind the scenes in your dashboard to help you succeed as a podcaster. So about a month ago, Apple made this big announcement. Well, they made a lot of announcements about new products and computers. And Tim Cook, while he was walking in from his car to the Apple headquarters, talked about the new Apple Podcast updates. And we made really almost an entire episode about that 4 weeks ago. And there were some things that were true then that aren't true anymore, and some things that we want to make sure that you're aware of about the new updates, the app, Podcast Connect. So we're going to get you up to speed on all of that. The first one being, it is now, to our knowledge, safe to claim your show in Podcast Connect and start interacting in there. Before, there were issues with people's podcasts getting apps accidentally removed from Apple Podcasts and all the third-party apps that pulled from that, which is like a no bueno situation, right? You don't want your podcast just disappearing. And but they've since fixed that. And so that's a good thing. And so as we're talking about these features, you can now go in, log into your Podcast Connect, your new Podcast Connect dashboard, and see some of these things and follow along for your own show. And the first thing that I thought was cool that they just introduced was the ability to see ratings and reviews from other countries other than the country that you live in. So before that, you'd have to use a service like Chartable or My Podcast Reviews in order to pull different reviews in, because if you just pull it up on your phone, it's only going to show you reviews from the country that you live in. But now you can go in and see other ratings and reviews. So Alban, I know that when we were able to get on a call with Apple to learn more about the new Podcast Connect platform, they gave us this tip on which countries to look at to see all of your ratings and reviews. Do you remember what that was? But I think it's really helpful.
It feels like a quiz. Yeah. Your podcast is probably getting reviews where you're getting plays. And so if you look at your Buzzsprout account or in your Apple Podcasts dashboard, where are you getting a lot of plays? Apple has specific storefronts for 170 countries. And so if your podcast is primarily being listened to in the United States and Canada, check out United States and Canada when you're looking for reviews. You may not have as many in Russia or Uganda. Anywhere that your podcast doesn't have a lot of listeners, it's probably not getting a ton of plays. So that's where I would start. And I mean, you can flip through all 170 countries if you'd like. The valuable part of this is you want to be hearing from everybody how your podcast is resonating. And so if, we were only looking at the US, reviews, we actually may miss about half of our reviews because they'd be spread across other countries. So check them out, see what people are thinking. And, I love highlight them on your podcast. If people are doing you the service of leaving you a nice review and letting you know what they enjoy about the podcast, highlight it on the show, maybe read some off and thank people. And I guess I should do that now. Thanks to everybody who has rated and reviewed Buzzcast across Podchaser and Amazon or Apple Music.
Apple Podcasts. There we go.
I just pulled up Buzzcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see it. If you're listening onto the podcast, I'll walk you through. I just pulled up Buzzcast in our Apple Podcast Connect dashboard. And if you go from the home page where it has everything to the show level, what they call a show, which is an individual podcast, and then you got ratings and reviews on the left side, that's where you can find everything. And so you have this little drop down with every country that you're in. And so if I go to Canada, I can see that, we recently had the Nutrition Junkie leave us a glowing 5-star review saying, I recently launched a podcast with a friend, and this show has been so helpful in teaching me the ins and outs of the podcasting world. Great guests, and the host asked really well thought out, engaging questions. Keep them coming.
I mean, this is definitely a setup. Travis was like, "Oh, let's just pull a random country, Canada, where they compliment the host for his great questions."
That was completely unscripted. Other than the fact that I knew we had at least one review in Canada. I did check that part before the show, but
so do you have to click into each country individually? Like if you clicked in a country with no reviews, then you got to keep going through them all?
Yeah, which is why you want to at least have, I know that I've got a good amount of plays in these countries before you start clicking through, or you are really going to be clicking like Cambodia, Canada, just kind of going through the whole Cameroon and kind of clicking through that whole list. So make sure you've got some plays there and then go find them.
That's kind of silly, isn't it? Like they don't have an all countries option?
We asked them that specifically,
right?
And the answer was they didn't really set it up for that. They were very coy about, maybe we'll think about it, do something in the future, but for now, this is the way to do it. And if they were to make a press release, they would say, why would you ever want to do it any other way? Like this is the best way to look at your ratings and reviews.
Yeah, this is the Apple way. This is the Apple way. It's like in the same event that they talked about podcasts, they also announced AirTags and the new remote for the Apple TV that doesn't have like a built-in AirTag. Why not? Well, we think you're really going to love the new Apple TV remote.
So another cool metric that's relatively new that came out with this new Podcast Connect dashboard is the engaged listener metric. Alban, walk us through what that metric does. So if we go to analytics and then we choose Buzzcast, you can see right here in the middle, this new engaged listeners number.
So a big part of this announcement, obviously everyone knows, is podcast subscriptions inside of Apple Podcasts where people can pay for your show. And one thing that you need to know is not only how many downloads are you getting, but how many downloads are you getting in Apple Podcasts that are people who are really engaged. And so if Travis hovers over that little question mark, what I'll tell you is either somebody is a engaged listener if they listen to 20 minutes of an episode or at least 40% of the episode. And then we know like our number here it's a bit lower than our actual listeners, which means that about 200 people didn't make it to 20 minutes, that they listened to a bit less. No big deal. Maybe we can work on making the show a little more engaging. But 549, those are probably the only cohort of people that are actually interested in paying for any content. And so that's a good number for you to use when you're thinking, what is my potential audience in case I were to decide to launch an Apple Podcast subscription show? It would be, probably the biggest number we could hope for would be half of that number. So maybe we would get out of the roughly 2,000 plays we get across all channels, I would be shocked if we got over 250 people to actually pay anything for these podcasts. Because you got to remember, it's only people on Apple Podcasts. It's only the people that are engaged. And then it's probably the only people who are engaged enough that they're willing to pay for some of the content. So it does get quite a bit smaller. But it's a useful metric. And as we learn more about maybe what the conversion rate from engaged listeners to paying subscribers is, we'll definitely share that because that'll be useful to decide if that's a path for you to go down or if you should just continue focusing on open content that's available to everybody.
Yeah, and quick update. So I don't believe that they've rolled out the new subscriptions feature yet. it still have all these banners saying it's coming soon, get ready, it's going to be awesome. But, TBD on when you can actually create premium content inside of Apple Podcasts.
Did they give a date or did they just say like June? I think
they said
June.
Early May, and it is now.
They said early May.
And now it's mid-May. So
I thought it was late May. It's funny that we all have such different memories.
Well, hey, if they spent that time cleaning up the bugs in Podcast Connect, I think that's time well spent.
They probably were not anticipating spending the next month working on bugs, but
yeah. And then if you want to see like other, me talking about this more in depth, we have a ton of videos on our YouTube channel we posted recently. So if you want to go like specifically into each one of these things we're talking about and some of the other features they're rolling out, go and check out the YouTube channel. Have a lot of good resources for you there. But along with that, you can now submit new shows to Apple Podcasts again, because there was a period of time where, I believe they weren't actually accepting any new shows. Is that right, Kevin?
There was, I don't know if they'd shut it down. They did shut it down like 2 days before the event. And then they supposedly opened it back up again, but there was all these bugs. So very few people were actually able to submit a new show. But I think they opened it up shortly after the event, but then it was mostly validation errors. People like errors from your artwork doesn't meet the right specs to you've got too many categories selected. I mean, all sorts of crazy errors that didn't really exist. It was just their validator was making up errors and not letting people submit shows. But I think most of those are worked out.
Yeah, so you can now submit a new show to Apple Podcasts. And we actually updated all the screenshots in the instructions. So if you create a new podcast on Buzzsprout and you go to Apple Podcasts, we have step-by-step instructions on how to get in. We've updated all those screenshots so you can follow along with that to submit your show. And like a weird wording thing that they do is when you submit a new show, they ask you, is this a new show or an existing show? And even if you are just getting started and all you have is a trailer episode and it's in your mind a new podcast, they want you to choose existing show because then they're going to ask for your RSS feed. Where a new show, I believe, is for their new premium content subscription model.
Right. You select new show if it's a podcast that you're creating just for Apple Podcasts. It's a podcast that you're creating. It's brand new as of the minute that you're logging in, and you're going to start uploading content right there. If it's a show that you have created on Buzzsprout or another podcast host and it's going to be available to everybody, then you click existing show and give them the RSS feed.
That's another funny. We love Apple. Everyone we work with at Apple is awesome, but they all have the same response. They're like, any feedback on the new system? So we gave them some feedback, and that was one of the feedback points we gave. Like, that wording could be confusing, and they're like, duly noted. Anything else? Like, we're not going to change it.
They're like fake taking notes on a notepad, and they just like crumple it up and put it in the trash bags.
Yeah.
You're going to feel really bad if they update that wording and then you just...
Well, they haven't updated it yet.
You're going to be like, oh, wait, they were listening, and I was giving them grief.
But, I will say in all humility, they are Apple and I am not. So it's like they invented the iPhone and the iMac and the iPod and everything. They're obviously very smart people. So I'm not saying I'm smarter than them. But yeah. I think that wording is confusing. They think it's not. Maybe they're right. They are Apple. I'm not, but it seems weird to me.
We've talked about Podcast Connect, that now you can actually submit podcasts again. We talked about some of the new stuff you can do in there. Along with that was this new rollout of a new Apple Podcasts app. It's supposed to be amazing, biggest update since the invention of podcasting back in, 1994 or whatever they say. And
where are you, Travis?
I'm in rare form today.
Apple podcasting started in 2001.
There you go.
2006, Apple has iTunes stores are supporting podcasts. This is your podcasting history tip of the day.
Thank you, Alban. Thank you for the fact check. We got our internal Snopes review. So, Kevin, you've been downloading the beta versions of this software as they're coming out, and we've been hearing a lot about the not so great rollout of these new versions of Apple Podcasts. Things like HTML formatting getting stripped out, links not working, numbers randomly appearing and disappearing in episode titles. What are some of the things that we've been hearing in support as far as like the new Apple Podcasts app, and like what are some best practices in the immediate future to make sure that you're set up for success and your listeners are not going to have a problem listening to your show?
Yeah. So I'm going to do my best to stay away from all the technical stuff of what's happening, but there is a pretty major change in how the Apple Podcast app works. It used to be a pretty much standalone app. When you would launch the app and you would browse for a podcast, it would use the Apple Podcast directory to help you find the show that you were looking for. And then once you subscribe to that show, it would cut off the relationship with the Apple Podcast directory and then work with the host from that point forward. So it would check directly with the host for new updates to your RSS feed. If it found an update, it would download all the information from your RSS feed. It would download the episode directly from the host. That's what's changed, is what it seems like. It's changed in this latest app. The Apple Podcast directory is hitting the Buzzsprout servers much more frequently, and the apps themselves are hitting Buzzsprout servers less frequently. So it seems like what they're doing now is they're trying to, at a server level, keep up to date with what all the changes are on the host, so that their Apple Podcast app can speak directly with Apple servers instead of podcast hosts. Totally fine. A lot of apps work like that. It's just a big change. And it seems like there's some struggles with the change. One of the biggest struggles is that the Apple servers are now taking the RSS feeds and parsing them so that they can pass that data into the apps. And it seems like they're having some struggles as they're parsing that data. They're stripping most of the HTML. They're interpreting tags incorrectly sometimes. And so while they work that out, it's not a great experience right now. So in my testing, what I'm seeing is that I feel like the app is working pretty well. The app is working just fine because you can manually subscribe to an RSS feed. Like you can make the new Apple Podcast app, you can make it work like it used to work. And the way that you do that is you say add a show by URL, you put a URL in of an RSS feed, and then the app is checking directly with the host. It's not going through Apple's servers and parsing that feed. When you do that, they work great. All the HTML is there, the formatting is there, the links are there, bullets, numbered lists, everything. So that tells me the app is capable of doing it right. What's happened? So the problem must be somewhere on the Apple side, because when you run through the Apple directory and find a show and follow it that way, now it's getting the data through Apple servers, which is an interpretation of the data that Buzzsprout is serving up, and somehow in that interpretation, it's losing all of its formatting. This is a very long way of me telling you that I think this is something Apple can fix on the server side. I don't think we have to wait for a big iOS update to get a new version of Apple Podcasts app to make this work. So hopefully they're working on it. Again, we've let them know. I've let them know everywhere. I've let them know on email. I've let them know in conversations. Alban's let people know. I've let them know on Twitter. We've been letting them know privately and publicly. I think they're aware of it, and it's just kind of a waiting game. James Cridland at Pod News has let him know, has asked for comments multiple times. This is not, it's not uncommon for Apple to not comment on things while they're working on them. So it's not they think podcasting is, second-class citizen in the Apple world, and that's why they're not commenting. No, it's just how Apple kind of treats everything, is that they're probably aware of it. They have to prioritize it. They're a big company. They've got a lot of initiatives. They got a lot of things. So a fix will come when a fix comes, and we just don't know if that's next week or next year. We hope it's sooner than later, but we'll let you know as soon as we see it.
So there's a recent report looking at Clubhouse and how many downloads it's been getting in the App Store recently compared to February, and noticing that there's been a sharp decline from its heyday when Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg are jumping into rooms and chatting with people. And, I know that we've covered Clubhouse here on Buzzcast before. So we just kind of want to talk about where it's at right now, what to do moving forward, and, our plans for using Clubhouse for Buzzsprout and to interact with you guys. And then just thinking through best practices for using Clubhouse and apps like it, especially now that Twitter has a similar feature, Facebook's rolling out a similar feature, how to really leverage these things to grow your podcast, engage with your listeners, all those kind of things.
The first thing I want to kind of remind people, and so when this happens the next round, we all maybe don't stress too much. There was a time when Periscope was just going to dominate the podcasting industry. I remember being at Podcast Movement, people are periscoping their entire time at the event. And I think it was 2015. Everyone was like, is this going to kill the podcasting industry? And then when Spotify came into the podcasting industry, we were all scared that Spotify was going to take everything over. And then Clubhouse was going to kill the entire podcasting market. and then Twitter Spaces were going to do it, and now whatever Facebook is building is going to kill podcasting. I think like the one lesson I want to take away is podcasting has been affirmed time and time again since 2001 that we have a 20-year track record now of people creating great audio content, and it's working, and people really enjoy the content that probably many of you are actually creating. And all this new attention each time when it's Clubhouse and when it's new Fireside app that's going to come out from Mark Cuban's group, whenever these new things are coming out, it's really just validation that this audio format is working and what you're building is already, people are already like interested in that content. And don't be too stressed when you think maybe these other things are going to take over, because like we've seen with Clubhouse, like we saw with Periscope and Meerkat and Spotify and everything in the past has been, we get a lot of hype when things are new and they get very exciting. And for a second, they seem like if the trajectory launches, it'll pass podcasting, and then it cools off and it settles out a little bit better. So, yeah. So the story there is that, like Travis, you just said, Clubhouse has cooled off quite a bit. I think the fact that kind of really got that to my mind, besides not feeling personally like I wanted to be on Clubhouse as much, was they finally launched their Android app and it never hit number 1 in the Android store. It charted up to, I think, number 3, but it never got to that number 1 spot. And so, yeah, with the amount of like, when we would do a Clubhouse room a few months ago, the first few, we were getting over 100 people in every time, and we would go for 2 hours, and people would constantly email and DM me saying, please do this somewhere else because I'm on Android. I really want to be on Clubhouse. And then to hear that even with all of that interest that was there a few months ago when they launched an Android app that it didn't even chart number 1, helps kind of illustrate, that it's kind of cooled off. But there's still ways to use Clubhouse and to use what I'm calling just social audio. Clubhouse, Twitter Spaces, Instagram Live, Facebook Live, if Facebook launches just an audio only version, all of these like live social engagement platforms. Podcasting is one way. You're talking into a mic and you're hoping there's people on the other end listening to it. And you often can feel a little bit lonely or disconnected from your audience because maybe they're not actually talking back. They might leave a review, but maybe they're not sending emails, and you're definitely not hearing their voice. So what I've seen that's worked really well, Kate Casey does this for her podcast. And what she does is she has her podcast, but then she also does Clubhouse rooms where she gets a lot of people just in the room to talk about the podcast. And I think that they're a great way to have a community feel for your podcast as kind of a supplement or a nice bonus for people who really enjoy the podcast to be able to go and discuss it with other people who really enjoy it. And maybe they get to engage with the podcast host herself. I think that's really valuable. And I would really look at testing that out for your shows. I just wouldn't feel the anxiety that maybe a lot of people were feeling a few months ago that Clubhouse maybe was going to totally take away everything that they built in podcasting.
So would you put Clubhouse now in the category of, if you think social audio is the right way or is a channel that you could use to grow your podcast, would you put it in the same category that we do with other social networks, like where we say, find the one where your audience is? So if you're already doing a lot of interaction on Twitter, then look at Twitter Spaces, not Clubhouse. Like, don't just try to find the most popular one or whatever. Try to find where are your people and meet them there.
There's this period in the beginning of every social media where there aren't ads there. The weird marketing guys like me aren't there yet. And it's just like cool. It's just like people. And it's so much more fun. And things work so much better. And so if you see, so there's always this moment where it's like, TikTok is amazing. Like, oh my gosh, Instagram is so much fun. Clubhouse is incredible. And it's because you could go into a room And it's somebody who you never would have access to on one of the more established platforms. Is just in the room and now you're having a chat with them. So I think Clubhouse had that moment for a while where tons of big creators were testing it out. And I think, yeah, what you just said, Kevin, is it's kind of gone through that hype cycle. And while there's a ton of really interesting people still on Clubhouse, the demographics now are back to normal, where it's lots of people who are just like me on most social platforms. They're not really creating content or just kind of slightly engaging. And there's these super creators, the top 1% who are on every platform, and that's their full-time job. And they're still there, but maybe their concentration's not as high. And so your chance of like ending up at a room and like, oh my gosh, Elon Musk took my question, that's probably not going to happen as likely. So yeah, to your question, I always say pick the one social media that you personally enjoy and that your audience is already there. And so if your audience is on Instagram, well, I'd be on Instagram Live. And if your audience is in a Facebook group, then do stuff on Facebook. If your audience is on Twitter, then Twitter Spaces is probably where I would go, because you get a lot of benefits from doubling and tripling down on one platform, much more than trying to spread yourself thin and try to figure out what works on LinkedIn versus YouTube versus Instagram, etc.
So Alban, you just mentioned Twitter Spaces, which are pretty new. Walk us through what that feature actually is, what it does, and kind of your thoughts on it in general.
I actually like Twitter Spaces probably quite a bit more than Clubhouse. It's pretty much Clubhouse, where it's audio-only conversations. You have speakers on stage. You can bring people up to speak. People can have reactions in the moment, so they can put up, different emojis and stuff, just so you kind of see engagement from the audience, even people who aren't speaking. It's just as well, if not a little bit more feature heavy than Clubhouse, or at least features that I would use. So it's pretty comparable. The big upside for me is if you already are on Twitter, it's so much easier to just build on Twitter, because if you've got a few hundred, I think you have to have 600 followers to be able to start a Twitter space. So if you start a Twitter space, all 600 of your followers start seeing, hey, you're having a conversation in Twitter space, and then they can join the conversation. And when they join, then all of their followers see that they're in a conversation. And so you have this really awesome ability to reach a lot of new people and have your space not go viral, but get a good amount of attention pretty quickly, where I never had that happen in Clubhouse before. And you can just see all these interesting people that kind of show up. You can have a conversation with them. And what I found was, at least in a few of them where I talked for, we had maybe an hour and a half, we were on there, you end up getting quite a bit more Twitter followers. So people who come to the conversation, if they enjoy it, they might decide to stay and maybe follow you. And that has that really awesome effect of stuff that, tweets that you're putting out. If those resonate with people, you're getting followers, then they may show up for a Twitter space. And as Twitter seems like lately they're really investing in a lot of new features, I'm more and more inclined to just consolidate there rather than trying to build Clubhouse and Twitter separately, at least personally, since that's where I find, I enjoy the internet the most. So yeah, especially if you already have a Twitter following, I think it's quite a bit better for Clubhouse.
There's no part of you that says this is Clubhouse's idea and Twitter came in and ripped them off. And what about these, 4 or 5 people who built Clubhouse in the first place, and now this big Goliath Twitter's coming in and trying to smash them? None of that plays into your decision making at all. You're happy just to go with the bigger, better product.
When you put it like that, Kevin, it makes me feel a lot of guilt. Clubhouse was just value. They just raised money at a $4 billion valuation. So
poor guys, poor team.
Once the valuation starts with a B, then I'm not like, like a billion.
You're not really, if the underdog starts with a B in valuation.
They're not fine. Truly at underdog. Now, Twitter's quite a bit bigger. but like I'm just engaging with the internet in the spaces that I enjoy. I don't owe people to go to their specific spot. I think that this is a good thing for me to remember though, when like Facebook launches a podcast player inside the app, I will personally be like, well, the podcasting industry's been here for 20 years and then Facebook showed up and they're doing this stuff and I don't like it. And I'll be kind of the, get off my lawn guy to Facebook. Maybe I need to remember, the Facebook they have way more people on their platform than anywhere else. And for probably billions of people, it's still their primary social media. And so when that happens, anyone who listens to this, if I start complaining about Facebook, maybe just like send this little clip to me and be like, you remember, like, there's billions of people that are now getting access to podcasts. Maybe you shouldn't be so worked up.
Well, and so much of the world experiences the internet through Facebook, right? Like
Yeah.
Facebook is the internet browser that they experience the world through. One thing you said, though, that I want to circle back to real quick. You talked about how when you go live in a Twitter space, it notifies your followers. And then if they join in, it notifies their followers. Is Twitter like currently pushing the feature to that extent? Because I know algorithms are always trying to filter what they think you should look at versus kind of a chronological feed. But is this like still new enough of a feature, but they're really trying to push it and it's really a great growth engine for your Twitter account?
What you get is you get your timeline. And then at the top, anybody who send a fleet, which is just like a story on Twitter, is at the top of the little circles and you can see those. But then there's also this, hey, there's a conversation happening between these people that you follow. And they're not sending, at least I don't get notifications saying like, so-and-so is going live, jump in. Instead, it's like you open up the Twitter app and you see somebody that you admire is having a conversation. You click in and you listen to it for a while. And maybe it's for a minute or maybe it's for an hour. So I don't think that they're just pushing it now and it's going to go away. That they'll downgrade it because that feels like it's already not too intense. I think that just people that use Twitter a lot probably pull it up to check what's happening 20 times a day or something. It's probably quite a few, probably more than I would care to admit for myself. And you see that a conversation's happening and you've got 15 minutes, maybe you jump in and you chat for a while. So I don't know, give it a try, give anything a try and see what works for you.
Well, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Buzzcast. If you want to watch all the other videos that we did on all the new Apple Podcast features and channels and subscriptions and Podcast Connect, make sure you go and check those out on our YouTube channel. And if you have not listened to it yet, make sure you listen to the last audio episode of Buzzcast where you got to hear the origin story of Buzzsprout, where it came from, the story about how Tom stole Kevin's motorcycle, all that fun stuff you can listen to in that episode. But thanks for listening to Buzzcast. We'll catch you in the next one. Keep podcasting.